Is a senior research fellow here at YIISA, and we've been really honored to have him as a visitor throughout this academic year. And I know he's actually leaving us on Friday. So on a personal note, which is uncharacteristic of the seminar series, from all of us at YIISA, we wanted to wish you a very happy and special birthday.
Thank you.
Bassam will be celebrating his birthday with his wife in Manhattan over the weekend, so we want to wish you a happy birthday and thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And also thank you really for the time and effort and energy and patience you've shown with us and shared your wisdom and your experience, so thank you. So for those who don't know, Professor Tibi is the Professor Emeritus of International Relations of the University of Goettingen. Sorry. And he's been there since 1973. He's also the White Professor at Large from Cornell University and held this post since 2004. He's been a visiting scholar at universities such as Harvard. He's a senior research fellow at the Asian Research Institute at the National University of Singapore. He's held 18 visiting professorships on 4 continents and has lectured at at least 30 universities on 5 continents. He received his training at the University of Frankfurt under the famous and important scholars Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno, Holocaust survivor, and I know that this influenced your work profoundly. And he did a PhD in political science and philosophy, and then in 1981, he was the Dr. Habil, the German superior PhD he received from the University of Hamburg. He has 27 books in German, 16 have been translated into different languages, and he has 8 books in English. And I'm very pleased to say that his upcoming book is going to be entitled Islam's Predicament with Modernity, Religious Reform and Cultural Change, and he's actually publishing it here through Yale University Press. So it's really an honor to have you here again. And
3 years ago, it was really a stroke of luck. I was in Israel at the University of Tel Aviv and at the invitation to attend a symposium on anti-Semitism at the University of Tel Aviv, and it was a stroke of luck to meet Charles there. And we like each other. We had intellectual exchange, and shortly after that, he asked me whether I would be interested to come to Yale to lecture, and I was here 2007 and give a big lecture, and I'm happy it was received well, and that was the grounds for coming back here as a research fellow since last year, and it has been highly beneficial time, both on a personal level, very pleasant, especially to work with Charles, and also to enjoy the company of all grade 6 fellows. It was really wonderful to be with you, and I would like also to acknowledge the highly important support of Lorraine Clark. Without Lorraine Clark, I would haven't been able to do half of my work. Yeah? So Lorraine Clark will be in the acknowledgement of the new book. So as you might have noticed that in terms of language, the announcement is the Islamist challenge to America. And sometimes people who don't know, even scholars, they say, you are not okay with English? It must be Islamic, not Islamist. Yeah. When I say there's a distinction, and the distinction is there is Islam. Islam is a religion. Islam is a cult. Islam is a cultural system. I am a devout Muslim, and I'm proud. I mean, when I have problems with, Islamism is another word for Islamic fundamentalism. It has no other meaning. And when I have problems with Islamism, and I acknowledge this because, it's now way behind. I was, for 5 years, from 1990 until 1995, for 5 years, I was under protection of the state because there was a fatwa to kill me. And I had 3 bodyguards around the clock, and I was only able to move in an armored Mercedes in Germany. And when I used to travel, I used to travel with three armed bodyguards, and so I know what Islamism is. Yeah? So Islam is the religion, it's my religion, and when I face them, I tell them I descend from the family of the Prophet, and this is there's a historical record about that in the history of Damascus. So I'm a devout Muslim. I come from the nobility of Damascus. I have a heritage of lineage going back to the Prophet, and so if you deny me, I am not Muslim, or some people say I'm part of the propaganda. Say I have been either infiltrated by the Jews, or Mr. Tibi is a hidden Jew. He's not a Muslim, he's a hidden Jew, and he's supposed to destroy Islam from within. And the only thing I'm doing is to build a bridge between Islam and Judaism. And I had the great honor, 1994, when I was still under police protection, to establish in London at the Westminster Synagogue, together with Rabbi Friedlander. Rabbi Friedlander is also a German Jewish Holocaust survivor, and he was the leader of the synagogue in London, and we established together the Jewish-Islamic dialogue. So the assumption already included in the announcement, Islamist challenge to America, and later on Islamist anti-Semitism, is there's a distinction between Islam and Islamism. And so if you speak about Jew hatred and about anti-Semitism, I relate this to Islamism, not to Islam. Unfortunately, there's a book by a highly respected scholar, his name is Andrew Boston. The book, about 800 pages. The title of the book is The Origins of Islamic Anti-Semitism. And on the cover of the book states, Jew hatred and anti-Semitism is as old as Islam is. And so if this were true, so I'm doing the wrong work, because I want to establish peace. As a Muslim, as an Arab, I'm ethnically Syrian, I'm now a German citizen. I have been calling for at least 20 years, in the past 20 years. Well, now it's easy to do it, or maybe easier than before, calling for the recognition, for the Arab and Islamic recognition of Israel as a sovereign state. And when we established the Jewish-Islamic dialogue in London, we were 20 Muslims, and we acknowledged that the Judaism is not only a religion, but Jews are people, and Jews are entitled to their own right to the sovereignty, which means Israel is the home of Jews, and Israel is a sovereign state, and there can only be peace, a lasting peace, if Muslims and Arabs were willing to accept the state of Israel and recognize its sovereignty. And I have been working on this with many Jewish scholars, I mean politically, and with Jewish scholars. One of my mates is Professor Herbert Kalman. Professor Herbert Kalman is a Viennese Jew, and who was, until his retirement, a distinguished professor at Harvard University. We worked for 20 years bringing together Palestinians and Israelis, and to teach them how to acknowledge one another as a ground for peace. So, having explained to you the distinction between Islam and Islamism, I can move on and to argue that I am against any binary, and I am against also polarization. I was critical of President Bush because he contributed to a lot of polarization, and I think President Obama is a stroke of luck because he's engaged in bridging, and I very much hope that he doesn't go into the other extreme. So the one extreme is polarization that was pursued by the Bush administration, and the other extreme would be appeasement. I do not believe that Islamism can be appeased, because I believe that Islamism is a kind of totalitarianism. And totalitarian ideologies and movements cannot be appeased. And I hope this will not be the policy undertaken by President Obama. I support him, but not if he goes that way. So there is an image of the United States. I mean, I will be talking to you about anti-Semitism and Islamism, but the lecture is announced rightly at my request as the Islamist challenge to America. So what are we talking about? Am I confusing things? No, I am not. And I can make this clear with the following illustration. I have learned this in America, to start with an illustration, anecdote, or but I'm not going to tell her. Maybe I can tell you this anecdote before I continue on. Well, my greatest dream was to go to Harvard. And I didn't want to go to Germany, I wanted to go to Harvard, but my parents sent me to Germany, I had to submit. 62, I came to Germany. 20 years later, I had the honor and the pleasure to go to Harvard, and I was so excited. I'm professor, full professor, since 1973. I was so excited about Harvard, and I prepared the German way, a lecture in writing, and I have rehearsed it in front of the mirror several times, and I delivered the lecture 100% perfect, and it was not received well. What did I do wrong? Yeah, and I mean the response was clearly not positive. Yeah, the lecture was okay. It was published as an article without any revisions in the Middle East Journal in Washington. So the issue was not the lecture. So what was it? At Harvard Faculty Club, the dean said to me in joking, "Professor Tibi, you have a Middle Eastern background. Why did you speak and behave like a German professor?" And I said, what did I do? I mean, I studied in Germany, but I'm not German. I'm German citizen, but I'm not German. So he said, well, you read. We do not like reading. You have to learn how to engage in free speech. You speak very seriously. You do not smile. Here in America, we expect jokes, anecdotes. And he said, if you don't learn that, you will not make your way here. Yeah? That was, I had one cultural shock in my life when I came from Damascus, October 26th, to Frankfurt to study there. And I didn't speak one word of German by then. I saw people kissing at the airport, hugging at the airport. I mean, the way where people behaving, that was a real cultural shock for me. And the story I told you, this Harvard story, was the second cultural shock in my life, with the implication that in the following years, I have been engaged, I continue to be engaged in de-Germanizing myself. Yeah? So now part of this de-Germanization is the way I lecture, I engage in free speech, and I start this anecdote. There was a report in a New York Times that was on March 27, including a disclosure. All of you know of the Gaza war, and all of you know that there were suspicions that there were kind of arms struggling. And nobody knew exactly where do the arms come to Gaza, how Hamas is fighting. And the Israeli intelligence found out, that was not disclosed at the time, found out that Iran is highly involved in smuggling arms, and the logistic of the smuggling was via Sudan. And then, during the war, the Israeli Air Force, that was not disclosed until last month. The Israeli Air Force bombed a convoy, an Iranian convoy, however, traveling through Sudan to bring the arms in their way to Gaza, later on sea. And when the disclosure was published, the Sudanese did not speak about it, because it was Iranian convoy, and how could Iranian arms be in Sudan? That was embarrassing for them, and therefore they were silent. And when it was discovered, when it was disclosed, the speaker of the Sudanese government said, I quote from New York Times, he said that was an American raid on Sudanese territory, and the Americans are committing language. The Americans are committing a genocide against the Sudanese people. And when at the press conference he was asked, according to the disclosure, the planes that were involved in the bombing were not American planes, they were Israeli planes. So what is your response? And his response is, quote unquote, we, the Sudanese government, do not differentiate between the United States and Israel. They are all one. End of the quote. So you see, a part of the Islamist, I don't say Islamic, a part of the Islamist anti-Semitism is that America is ruled by the Jews. And the Jews rule, in this conspiracy-driven thinking, the Jews are so strong, and my Jewish friends say, we are only 13 million people, and we govern the whole world, wow. So the Jews rule the United States of America through two channels. First, from Washington, they have their lobby there, and they determine American politics, and this is politics. And second, Wall Street Journal is in Israeli territory, Jewish Israeli territory, and there the Jews rule world economy. And through these both channels, the Jews determine what America is doing. And then when Israeli planes are bombing Sudan, then these are American planes. As you say, we do not differentiate. These are the same. Yeah. What's happening in Sudan? The Sudanese government is a fundamentalist government, and the Sudanese troops, I mean paramilitary troops, and also the army, they were involved in killing about between 1.25 million non-Muslim people who are Sudanese as well. As you know, there's an international warrant to arrest the president. This is the first sitting president in the world who is now wanted in a warrant. But then, in order to turn the table around, they speak of genocide when the Israeli Air Force bombs an Iranian convoy traveling through Sudan to smuggle arms. So this story illustrates the issue, and I will go through the issues, a couple of these issues. I will go through them one by one. And the first issue is the combination of anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism in Islamist ideology. I have done research on that issue in the past years. I was also last year fellow I was the first Muslim fellow at the Center for Advanced Holocaust Studies located at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, and did research on that. And the outcome of this research is an article published in the last issue of The Current. The Current is a journal published by Cornell University, where I have the honor to be White Professor at Large. And those of you who are interested, I hope I do not bug you, dear Lorraine. I know how generous you are. Lorraine has a PDF of the article. If you don't have access to this journal, the journal is The Current, Cornell University. The issue is 2008, issue number 1. This is the 12th issue. A PDF is the computer of Lorraine, and if you don't mind, Lorraine, that the people email you, and you can send them an attachment of this article. And there you will find evidence of what I'm talking about. The first issue is anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. The Islamists are against the Jews. They are not only against Israelis, or some say they are only against Zionists. They are not against the Jew. I had recently a fight in Washington with an American, I won't mention the name for decency. He said, why you are defaming these people are anti-Semitic? Are you neoconservative? I am a liberal, I'm not neoconservative, and I'm a Muslim and I'm an immigrant. But you see, when you, to belittle of the issue, say there is no anti-Semitism involved. But I will present evidence, and there's an evidence. The article is based on evaluation of Arabic sources in original. I do not quote secondary sources, I quote original sources. And these people do not differentiate, as he said, we see no difference between Jews, not Israel, Jews in America. There is no Jewish Air Force, there is an Israeli Air Force, there is an American Air Force. And so they do not distinguish, America is ruled by the Jews, and all Jews are Zionists, and there is no distinction between Zionism and world Jewry. So America is ruled by the Jews, and to be against the Jews is to be against America as well. The second issue is it's very important to distinguish between Judaophobia and anti-Semitism. I acknowledge, in order not to be understood, Judaophobia is also racism, and I am against any kind of racism. If you if you demonize people, if you have resentment against people as a collectivity, then you are a racist. But there are varying degrees. Judeophobia, people who are Judeophobic, they don't like the Jews, and for racist reasons. And this is an evil, no doubt. But these people do not say all Jews should be exterminated, should be annihilated. Anti-Semitism is a genocidal ideology. And I am not alone on this road. My authority is Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt, I mean, it's a big name, all of you don't know Hannah Arendt, but supposedly there's a person, some person may not know them. Hannah Arendt was a German Jew. She fled Germany, 33, came to the United States. She became professor at Columbia University, and there she wrote her major book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, and it was published 1955. And this is the major study in a study of the totalitarianism. And she says, Hannah Arendt says, anti-Semitism is basic to any ideology which is totalitarian. And in the chapter on anti-Semitism, she states literally, anti-Semitism is much more than Jew hatred. There are people who hate the Jews. They say Jews should go to hell, but they don't go further. Anti-Semitism goes much further. Anti-Semitism says the Jews are not only an evil, this evil should be extinguished, exterminated, annihilated. And this is a call for a genocidal ideology. And it is in Mein Kampf, in Hitler. And if people read that book, they would have realized, like when I mean, as you know, there were efforts at appeasement of Hitler before the breakout of the World War. But if you study the movement and study its ideology, then you would have known what is to come. And I call for the same. When people say, oh, Islamism, this is just a social movement, they want justice, they are against oppression, against the outside power of the West, they are against injustice. When these things are resolved, then it will be gone. I don't buy into that. Why? Because I have been studying this movement for 30 years. You might say I'm prejudiced, but this is not prejudice. I mean, I'm prejudiced for the fact that these people were trying to kill me for 5 years. But at that time, I kept my cool head and kept studying the issue. And when I make a statement, I support what I say with evidence and with reference to documents. So, Judeophobia, I am a scholar. I am not here to defend Islam and the Arabs, but I'm here at the university to work with Charles Moll in a scholarly manner. And I acknowledge in early Islam, in the 7th century, there existed Judeophobia. When you read Islamic texts, you will find not so positive sentiment against the Jews. And this has a long story, and I won't get to it, but just maybe few hints. Yeah? The Prophet, our Prophet, when he was young, he traveled a lot. He was married to a woman who was about 20 years older, and she was a trade woman. And he traveled with the caravans for doing business in Jerusalem and Damascus. And Jerusalem and Damascus were at the time not Islamic places. There were no Arabs there. The Arabs were in a place in Arabia, the place named today Saudi Arabia. There were no Saudi Arabia at that time either. And so there in Jerusalem, he encountered Judaism, and he was very, very impressed. There's a lot of documents for this. And when he started establishing Islamic religion after receiving revelation, starting with the year 610, he interacted also with Jews. And when he moved from Mecca to Medina, 622, this is the year number 1 in the Islamic calendar, he approached the Jews and he called them to join in, because he thought Judaism and Islam are so resemble one another. They are both very strong monotheism. And in the early years of Islam, Muslims used to pray in the direction of Jerusalem, not in the direction of Mecca. So early Muslims in Medina used to pray in the direction of Jerusalem, believing there will be a kind of Jewish Islamic symbiosis or alliance. But then the Jews refused to join Islam, and then an enmity developed, and this is one of the reasons in the background of Islamic Judaophobia. But that was not anti-Semitism. Please keep this distinction. And so this Judaophobia existed in a variety of ways through history with no implications. However, according to my friend and my teacher, Jewish teacher, Bernard Lewis from Princeton University, a very dear friend, we worked together, and he wrote a book about the Jews of Islam. This book also published by Princeton University Press, and in that book he says in Spain, in Islamic Spain, that was the highlight of Jewish culture, and at that time there existed a Jewish-Islamic symbiosis. But at the same time there were some Judaophobia, but anti-Semitism came to the Middle East, to the world of Islam, from Europe. In the 19th century, late 19th century, the first Arabs went to study in Paris, and most of them were Christians. And the first Arab anti-Semite was not a Muslim, he was a Christian. His name is Najib Azuri. He traveled to Paris, lived in Paris, and published a book in Paris, 1905. The title of that book is Le Réveil de la Nation Arabe, in French, which means the revival of the Arab nation. And he says, he adopts French anti-Semitism and applies it to the Arab world. He's a Christian, and he started to voice anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism means the Jews are evil, kill them. This is the message of anti-Semitism. Judaophobia is a racism, is ugly, but it is not murderous, because say, I don't like the Jews, that's it. But anti-Semites do not stop saying, I don't like the Jews. They say, I don't like the Jews, but they are evil, and they have to be annihilated. This anti-Semitism started in the 20th century. Very new, it never existed before, and it was an import from Europe. And there are two stages of anti-Semitism. The first stage is related to Arab nationalism, and Arab nationalists were secular. And they adopted nationalist ideology first from France, later on from Germany, and they also adopted European anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism I'm talking about today in this lecture is an Islamist anti-Semitism. Pan-Arab nationalism is gone. One of my major books, and people say it is my major book because I like it. Some people, even here at Yale, do not like my work on Islam because it does not fit into their mind, because it's very critical. They say Tibi wrote a book. My first book was Arab Nationalism Between Islam and the Nation State. If you want to see it, it is displayed without knowing that I'm here. I was so happy to go to Yale bookstore, and my books are displayed there, in the section Political Science and also in the section Islam. And this book is there, and Arab nationalism is dead since the Arab defeat in the war 1967. And since the 70s, there's a rise in political Islam, and political Islam is much older than Khomeini, because political Islam in its origins is Sunni, not Shi'i phenomenon. So Khomeini, if you want, if you really know the story, Khomeini is a latecomer. The first fundamentalist movement established in history is the movement of the Muslim Brotherhood, established 1928 in Cairo. And Cairo and Egypt are still the basic home of political Islam in its Sunni version, not Iran. Even though Egypt has a secular government, and Egypt is an ally of the United States, but the next movement to come to power, probably the Muslim Brotherhood, and I am very fearful to say, with the support of the United States of America. There is a Middle East initiative in Washington, which thinks one can appease Islamists and tame them and let them come to power, and then they will abandon jihad. Well, there are many Islamists who abandoned the jihad, but they did not abandon their goals, their political goals. Jihad is not the goal, jihad is just a means to reach the goal, and the goal is the Islamist order. So I hope I have made clear there is two distinctions. One distinction, I mean, we are at the university here, and we should comply with academic standards, so nuances as distinctions are very important. But this is not only important for academic research, this is also important for policies. You know, when people in Washington, I lived in Washington last year, and I was struck that, politicians know very little about Islam and the Middle East, and they do business. And there are people, I don't want to mention names because it's difficult in this country. If you mention names and movements, you get into legal troubles. Yeah? There are senators in the Congress who either ignore the distinction between Islam and Islamism, or even deny it. And this is very important for doing politics. So, first distinction between Islam, in Islam, between Judeophobia and anti-Semitism. Judeophobia existed since the 7th century. Anti-Semitism is new, it is an import from Europe. And the third distinction is between the anti-Semitism of Arab nationalism and the anti-Semitism of Islamism. These are very different issues. You know, pan-Arabs, nationalists, were British and French educated, some were German educated, and this is the elite. And this elite, you know, say 5–10% of the people, and they were also very elitist, and they had little impact on the whole people. But the Islamists, they speak the language of local cultures, and they have an appeal. So anti-Semitic Islamism, or Islamist anti-Semitism, is much more dangerous because much more effective than the secular anti-Semitism of pan-Arabism ever was. Yeah? Again, I refer you to this article in the Current, and also to some of my books. I have here. For later on, I have some flyers of my book, which are all 5 of my books are displayed in Yale Bookstore. And then the next point I move to, you may ask me, you are saying there's a distinction between Islam and Islamism. So what is the distinction? I was among the advisors of the American Army prior to the Iraq War. We were 5 advisors that were invited to the Naval War College, not far from here. And one of the generals, I cannot mention his name either, he said to me, Professor Tibi, I am not scholar, I am a military man, I have no time to read your book. You know, at the time, my book on political Islam was not published, but I had a book on the challenge of fundamentalism, political Islam, and the New World Disorder. Maybe you can distribute this. Yes. Okay. And he said to me, I have no time to read your book, but I expect from you to tell me, if you have a message, in 2 phrases, how can I distinguish between a Muslim, an ordinary Muslim, and an Islamist? And I said to him, it's possible to do that in 2 phrases. When you meet a Muslim person, you ask this person, is Islam for you a faith and a culture, or is Islam a concept of political order? And if this person says Islam is a concept of political order, then he is an Islamist, he's not only a Muslim. The definition of Islamism is, well, it is not from me, from them. They say al-Islam huwa deen wa dawla, which means Islam is a unity of state and religion. So religion is not only to be practiced in a mosque, and to be also practiced as a culture in your daily life, like Jews do, or other Christians, or people of other religions. Islam is a concept of political order, dawla. And you see how invented this is. I learned the Quran by heart in the age between 5 and 6 in Damascus. And I still know the Quran by heart. And in the Quran, you will not find the term dawla. Dawla in Arabic, devlet in Turkish, means state. And the definition of Islamism, by Islamists themselves, say, what is Islam? Say, Islam huwa deen wa dawla. Islam is deen, is the religion, and dawla is state. But the state, this term does not exist in the Quran. I mean, the formula does not exist, and the term dawla never. And so you see that you are dealing with an invention of tradition. And now, how come that that this concept of order, I mean, Islam is a concept of order, how does this concept of order imply anti-Semitism? The Islamists believe that Jews also want an order. They want a world order. And they say world Jewry is the instigator of the search of a world order, and Zionism is the political means to do so, and therefore there is a clash between two visions, one of Islamic world order and one of Jewish world order. And they say, therefore, there can be no peace, this is quote, there can be no peace between Islam and Judaism. And I can quote here, the major thinker and the major ideologue of Islamism was an Egyptian, and his name is Sayyid Qutb. I would like to tell you more about him, but I see time is running. But if you want, you ask me in the question and answer period, who was Qutb, what did he do? Sayyid Qutb lived 2 years in New York, and in New York he became a fundamentalist. And he returned to Egypt, and he is today the major, well, he was executed in 1966. He was hung up in public in Cairo. But his legacy, his writings, I saw his writings in 9/11. I was in Uzbekistan, in Central Asia, very close to the Afghan border. And I was presented with an evidence by Uzbeki intelligence services about the text used in the camps, training camps for jihadism of Al-Qaeda. There were 55 of them, and they were reading Sayyid Qutb, basic reading. And Sayyid Qutb says this quote, it is on page 133 in my article in the current, and the source of the Arabic, or the evidence of the Arabic source is given there. Who tried, this is his imagery of the Jew. Sayyid Qutb asked, quote unquote, translated by myself from Arabic. Arabic is my mother tongue, so the translation is correct. Who tried to undermine, there are references to historical events that you may not understand, but please ask me later. If I interrupt the quote, then I miss the point. So there will be references to issues and events that you do not know. If you want, I explain this to you later. Who tried to undermine the nascent Islamic State in Medina that was 622, and who incited Quraysh in Mecca as well as other tribes against the foundation of Islam? Question mark. It was a Jew. Who stood behind the Fitna war and the slaying of the third Caliph Uthman and all what followed hereafter as tragedies? It was a Jew. And also, who inflamed national divides against, this was now a jump from the 7th century to the 20th century, and who inflamed national divides against the last caliph, and who stood behind the turmoil that ended with the abolition of the Sharia, that was 1924. It was a Jew. It was Ataturk. Ataturk was not a Jew. He was a Muslim Turk. It was a Jew, it was Ataturk. So this is the logic against historical fact. The Jews, now the conclusion from these questions and the answers, it was a Jew. The permanent answer, it was a Jew. The Jews always stood and they continue to stand behind the war waged against Islam. It is a cosmic war. So it is not an empty war. So how can you appease? It's a cosmic war. Today, this war persists against Islamic revival in all places on earth. End of the quote. This text is used in indoctrination courses also in Europe, in Germany, in France, in the UK, and of course in the world of Islam. And I saw this text in Turkey, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and of course in the Arab world, and in the Islamic diaspora in Europe. So the statement is there is a cosmic war between Jews and Islam, and I do not take it. That's why I distinguish between Islamist and Islamic. If you say anti-Semitism is as old as Islam, then there can be no peace. But if you say it is Islamist, so you can say there are Muslims who are not Islamists, and these Muslims would agree, these Muslims who are not Islamists would agree to a peace resolution, to a peace settlement with the Jews. I mean, there are two levels. The Jews are civilizational community, and the Muslims as civilizational community, that they acknowledge one another. And there's the element of the state of Israel. The bottom line is to recognize the state of Israel, and this is not possible. Now, I jumped from Qutb to Hamas. You know, Qutb, the major movement is the movement of the Muslim Brotherhood. All existing Islamist movements in Sunni Islam in the Middle East are offsprings of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the most important one among them is Hamas, now ruling in Gaza. Hamas acknowledges the allegiance to the thinking of Sayyid Qutb, and in the Charter of Hamas, we find this. I hope you recall the quote I have been quoting verbatim earlier, and this is a piece from the Charter of Hamas, and it's almost the same text with some rephrasing. The Charter of Hamas states, you see the same line, who stood behind? It's always the same question. And they enhance it. And you might laugh, but this is not for laughing, this is actually sadly. Who stood behind the French and the communist revolutions? It was the Jew. In the pursuit of the interest of Zionism, the Jews were behind the First World War that led to the abolition of the Caliphate. The Islamic Caliphate, that was the last Islamic order, abolished 1924 by Ataturk, who was a Muslim, and then he was made to a Jew. The Jews were behind the First World War that led to the abolition of the Caliphate to get the Balfour Declaration. Then the Jews abolished the League of Nations to rule, then the Jews established the League of the Nations to rule through it the world, and hereafter they pulled the strings. You see, to pull the strings, this is the language of conspiracy. The Jews pulled the strings for the Second World War, so they are responsible for the Communist Revolution, for the French Revolution, for the First World War, for the Second World War. And what did they fight the Second World War? To establish the State of Israel and to replace the League of Nations by the United Nations and its Security Council. So the present United Nations and Security Council, this is a Jewish accomplishment. Yeah? The Jews rule the world. There is no single war without the hidden hand of the Jews acting behind it. Therefore, there can be no peace with them, period. So, in Europe, and also here in the United States, there are people who say you have to appease Hamas, you have to do politics with it. But Hamas does not comply with this. And I share with Charles this. We were yesterday talking, said, you know, he and I, he's a Jew, I'm a Muslim, say we disagree with Hamas, but we give Hamas credit for one thing. They are honest. They say what they think, what they believe. And I give you this story, and I cannot give you the evidence because the evidence is confidential. Yeah? I spoke to a high-ranking official of the European Union in Brussels, and he told me this story on grounds of anonymity. Yeah? So, you know, there's a suffering of Palestinian people in Gaza. And Gaza, before the war, yeah? And Gaza is actually encircled and sealed. The European Union used to pay half a million euro annually just to Gaza. Yeah? And this money stopped under pressure. And people now are blaming the European Union is responsible, that people are starving, that kids are dying in Gaza. And a high-ranking person in the European Union approached Hamas and to make this offer. You make, the European Union speaking, you make or you hold a press conference And this press conference, you make 3 announcements. Whether you comply with them or not, this is not our business. It's yours. But just say in public these 3 announcements. We recognize the state of Israel. Second, we agree to pass, we accept past agreements, translated in the Peace of Oslo. And number 3, we renounce violence. And if you do this, then within a week, the money will flow. And they said, no, we cannot. And they referred to their charter, and they said, Palestine is the property of God, in Arabic, Waqf Islami, and we have no whatever competence to negotiate over the property of God. Therefore, Israel has to go. So, how can you make peace with these people? I don't know. So, but I mean, so people who involve in appeasement probably either naive or they don't know or whatever. Yeah? So now I move further beyond Hamas to the movement of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim movement of the Muslim Brotherhood was established as the first Islamist movement in the history of Islam in general. And today, this movement is well connected throughout the world. I know, and there's literature about this, they exist in Germany, they exist in UK, in England, in Italy. They have a radio station, a big radio station, Radio Islam, in Stockholm, Sweden. And they control at least 2,000 mosques throughout Europe with the infrastructure that belongs to it. Yeah? And so I thought the United States is free of the Muslim Brothers. And I worked with a Turkish Muslim colleague at the Hassan Institute. Her name is Zaino Baran, and I worked with her last year in Washington, and we are working now in a book together on Islam in Europe. And she gave me a piece. It's published. It's not classified. It's about the Muslim Brothers in America. And I was scared. They are very strong in this country. Yeah? And I don't want to get into details. If you want, you look at the internet, the Hudson Institute, and the Hudson Institute has a journal. I missed now the name of the journal, but if you look at the Hudson Institute, Washington, they have a journal. And this piece was published last year with a big evidence about the presence of the Muslim Brothers here in the United States. And this movement, in its program, in its documents, it's throughout committed to anti-Semitism, Islamist anti-Semitism, and it does not accept peace with Israel, not to speak of the Jews. And so those who say, if you find a peace solution to the conflict in the Middle East, the anti-Semitism will end. I do not buy into this on the grounds of studies and documents. Now, number 6, the distinction between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Well, Zionism was founded by Theodor Herzl, a Swiss Jew. I visited Basel several times, so I'm aware of his heritage. But before Herzl there existed no Zionism. And Zionism, actually, I worked with the Israeli political scientist number 1, an elderly man. I hope the name is well known in Israel. He's like a flag. Shlomo Avneri. And I'm very proud that Shlomo Avneri wrote the endorsement to this book. I think I give some slide, but those who don't have it, please, you can give it. I can tell you this book. This is a Cornell book. This is a Cornell book about political Islam, political Islam in Europe and world politics. And the press, the Routledge Press, approached Professor Avneri and asked, without my knowledge and without knowing that we are friends, they approached him. Professor Avneri is distinguished professor for philosophy, European politics, and international relations at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and asked him for an endorsement. And he wrote back that he, quote unquote, that he appreciates my work, and he would be willing to write the endorsement. However, he adds, I care for the life and for the position of Professor Tibi, and I care also for the fact that his book will be welcomed in scholarship. But there are people who see if this book is endorsed by a Jew, by an Israeli professor, this will kill the book. Yeah? The editor in Routledge Press knows that Shlomo Avneri is a big name, and if this big name is related to my little name, so this is my benefit, and they ask me, do you think he's right, he cares for you? And I said, actually, I appreciate the fact that he cares for me, for my life and for my reputation, but it is for me enriching that he supports my book, and I take the hits. Yeah? And now the book is published, and people say, he criticized political Islam, and he gets an endorsement from the Hebrew University in Israel. So what? This is Israel is not a pariah state. Israel is a member of the United Nations, and it's a state to be acknowledged. Muslim brothers are dangerous, and they are waging a war of ideas, also here in the United States, and they have been successful in silencing every person who criticizes them as Islamophobic. So they term Judaophobia and Islamophobia, and they say those who criticize them are bashing Islam. You see, I'm not talking about Islam, I'm talking about Islamism, and this is very important. And the distinction of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism does not exist in Islamic sources. And I do that also in the article, and I want to bring to you a quote. I hope I find it. Yeah, yes, I found it. Yeah. This is a book written by two Saudi professors close to the Muslim Brotherhood, and this book is a bestseller, reprinted dozens of times, and I found it in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Egypt, and in the Gulf states. And the authors, they're named Jalisha and Zaiba, two persons, and they argue there can be no dialogue, no peace with the Jews. And they say that the West uses the term secularism to kill Islam, and the quote is, quote unquote, the West waves the flag of secularism, invades with its values the society of Islam to replace Islamic values. We shall talk about Zionism, and this is the source. It is not the West, it is Zionism. We shall talk about Zionism or war Jewry, they are the same. Listen again. The West, and then what is the West? The West is Zionism and war Jewry, and they are the same. In order to address the related master plan, the Jews have a master plan pursued by the related secret societies for the destruction of the world, in particular the world of Islam. Well, how can the Jews who are about 13, the maximal estimate, I think it would be 15, right? Am I right? 15 million. How could 15 million rule a world of 6 billion people? Well, it is America, with user America, yeah? And that's why America is looked at as the home of the Jews. It's not Israel, it's America. And it is very sad to see two American professors. One is Hersheimer, professor at Harvard. He was even the dean of the Kennedy School of Government. And the other professor is in Chicago, Walton Hersheimer. They published a book, The Israeli Lobby. And this book is more appreciated in the Arab world and Islam than here in the United States, even though it's in the United States also a well-selling book. I'm sad to say that. And they say American foreign policy, two distinguished American professors, American foreign policy is done in Washington with a Jewish shape. They don't say Jew, they say the Israeli lobby, but the Israeli lobby is American Jews, yeah? And the Islamists use this book, they say professors of Chicago and Harvard support what we say. So the Jews rule the world via America, yeah? And who are the Americans? The funny thing in the propaganda of Islamism, Americans are described as the new Crusaders. You know, the Crusades took place between the 11th and the 13th century for 200 years. And this is history. It's over. Today there are no crusades, and the crusaders were Europeans, Christian Europeans. And the fact is, the best history of the Crusades is completed by an Oxford professor, and he says that in his history of the Crusades, he says when the Christians invaded Jerusalem, literally he states, Jews and Muslims fought for the defense of Jerusalem, shoulder by shoulder. Jews and Muslims defended Jerusalem shoulder by shoulder. And then the first, very few people know that, the first Holocaust was not in Germany, it was I mean, Holocaust means to kill the Jews, annihilated. This is the meaning of, I mean, Dachau, and all these ugly places. The Crusaders chased the Jews and wanted to punish them because they sided with Muslims, and they burned the major synagogue in Jerusalem with all Jews hiding inside, about 800 to 900 Jews. That was the first massive or collective burning of Jews in history, according to this Oxford historian. So, and there's a book published by there's a Center of Middle Eastern Studies, and the Center of Middle Eastern Studies at Columbia University, if I'm right, was also involved in inviting the Iranian president, Ahmadinejad, to go to that university and lecture there. And there's a book published by this center with Columbia University Press, and the name of this book is The New Crusaders. And I never liked Bush, but Bush is not a crusader. But the Bush administration and the new, the new America, these are the new crusaders. And this propaganda is published by a university press. I'm glad you are here at Yale. This would never happen at Yale University. Yeah? And Yale University is publishing next year my book, my third book, about political Islam. And the content of this lecture will be included there. And I'm also working with Charles to publish also a volume with Yale University Press based on the lecture series held at YIISA, so to make YIISA a big international name in associating it to the name of Yale University. Yale University Press is a very big name. Can I still talk maybe 10 minutes? Or
5 minutes and then
5 minutes. Then I will skip. There's I studied, why I am committed. I am committed to the Jews and want to refer to the Holocaust with the one lesson. This should never happen again, not only to the Jews, but also to any other group in humanity. Yeah? So this is the lesson of the Holocaust. Yeah? And how do I come across this? I studied with Max Horkheimer. Max Horkheimer is a German Jew who came to the United States, 1933, but he was fully European. Well, he liked the United States and he felt well here, but after the war, he said, go back to Europe. He went back to Europe, 1950, and he was my professor. And he changed my life. Yeah? And maybe I conclude the lecture with a quote from him. America, regardless of its motives, saved Europe from complete enslavement. These are the words of Max Horkheimer. The response today from everywhere, not only in Germany, has been widespread and profound hostility toward America. So he says America saved the world from Hitler. So why people are not appreciated? Why this hostility toward America? He asks. Yeah? There has been a great deal of puzzling over the origin of this sentiment. Is it resentment? Is it envy? But it is also the errors made by the American government and its citizens. All play a role. It is especially startling to notice that everywhere where one finds anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism flourishes. And this is the point. Today, anti-Semitism is there where anti-Americanism flourishes. So therefore, anti-Americanism in Europe is very, very dangerous. And I was commentator on German television I was columnist in major newspapers, and because I refused to join anti-Americanism during the Iraq War, which I opposed, I lost all these positions. Anti-Americanism is very strong in Europe, and people shy away of saying, well, we don't like the Jews, they rule America. And so, Horkheimer states, I'll end soon, it is especially startling to notice that everywhere where one finds anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism flourishes. The general malaise caused by cultural decline seeks a scapegoat, and the Jews are the scapegoat. It finds the Americans and in America himself. Once again, the Jews who supposedly rule America are the cause of all the evil, and therefore the solution is extinguish them, and this is anti-Semitism. And if you are against genocide, if you are against murder, you cannot be silent about this, and you cannot also be silent against those people who belittle of these things in explaining this is only this is criticism of the oversight of the West, this is criticism of injustice. It is not that. It is, as Islamists themselves say, the Islamists say, we are waging a cosmic war against the Jews, and this war would only end when the Jews are exterminated, extinguished. What would be your response? Thank you very much.
We have some time for Q&A. Any questions?
Okay, thanks for the talk, was very interesting. I have two questions about the Hamas Charter. One question is related to terror organizations, because in terror research we try to classify and talk about different types of terrorism and try to see which organization is more, severe. And so it's interesting to listen to what you think about the externality, or to what extent you think that Hamas is a radical organization as opposed to Al-Qaeda. We have Al-Qaeda, we have Hamas, we have Bin Laden, the same, we have Hezbollah. So how do you map Hamas to, as opposed to these other organizations? And another thing, it's written in the internet that in 2007, Musa Abu Marzouk, he said that the Hamas Charter is not really important. It's some kind of document that was written by, but it was never used since. So how can we interpret these documents? I mean, I don't know, because I don't know the mentality. So what would you say about it? How can we need to interpret this and so forth?
Okay. First, make a reference. The best book or the best study of Hamas is a study published by Yale University Press last year. The author is Andrew Levitt, Levitt, Hamas, and he provides all evidence it is a terrorist organization. And the book was received, not so well, and the director of the press told me we had to receive so many hits. Said, but congratulations for being courageous and taking the hits, because this is life. You have to tell the truth. So first, I give you just some general information. Well, when Islamism was born, 1928, it was a jihadist movement. Jihad in Islam, I cannot explain this, we don't have the time. As much there is a difference between Islam and Islamism, there is a difference between jihad and jihadism. Jihad is classical, holy war, and jihadism is terrorism. So classical jihad is not terrorism, it's violence, but it is not terrorism. So now, Islamist movement went through a transformation in the past, let's say 10, 15 years. They have learned that they can reach more through peaceful political war than through jihad or jihadism. And this applies to Hamas. So as much there is a distinction between Islam and Islamism, there is a distinction between two directions within political Islam. One is jihadism. The jihadists say the only way to reach our goal is violence. It is the means for establishing the Islamic order. The peaceful Islamists, I call them institutional Islamists, the institutional Islamists argue it's better to march through the institutions. And there's a precedent for that in Germany. I was in the left in my young years, and one of the people who were with us who threw stones at police, and he has beaten policemen. Some of them who still today have physical suffering, was Mr. Joschka Fischer, who became Foreign Minister of Germany. Yeah, you see. So I mean, if you work through the institutions, you can move upward, and this is what Islamists now say: say yes to democracy, abandon the bullet, and accept the bullet. Abandon the bullet and accept the ballot box. Yeah. So go to the ballot box, and so they are these peaceful institutional Islamists. And in Iraq, the government of Iraq, which came to power through American assistance, exists of three Islamist parties who abandon jihad and accept peaceful action. However, they did not abandon their goal, the Islamic Sharia state. And this applies to Hamas as well. Now, Hamas, you mentioned Hezbollah. There's also in Iraq the Supreme Council for the Islamic Revolution in Iraq. These movements say we are against violence. Like Hezbollah has members in the government, they have members in the parliament, and they are in the state. But they do not abandon their militias. The only Islamist movement which has no militia is the AKP of Turkey, ruling since 2002. But they have the intelligence, they have the police, and they harass their foes and their critics without militias. So of course, I acknowledge the reality that there is an Islamism which is peaceful, and there's Islamism which is terrorist. But Hamas is both. Hamas came to power through elections. They came to power through the ballot box. In January, that was January 2006, right? And then the year after, as you remember, what did they do? They come to power through democracy, and 1 year after, they make a coup, military coup, and they arrested 450 PLO politicians are now in the prison in Gaza. They haven't done anything, they have no trial. They shout about, I do not like Guantanamo. This is against American understanding of law. And I'm happy that Obama is against it. But you see, the people who criticize Guantanamo, like Hamas people, say the Americans, they have their Guantanamo, they put Muslims there. But what is Hamas is doing? They put also their fools in jail and no trial. It's like Guantanamo, yeah? And so it is, now I answered the two questions. The third question, this politician you have quoted, who is an important politician of Hamas, he was speaking to Western journalists, and he told them, no, we have changed, yeah? We forget about the Carter, and we have now, we have moved on. There is a book by a French lady, her name is Caroline Forest, yeah? And the book is Frère Tarek. There's an English translation of it, published in New York and in London with Encounter Press last year. Forest, I can write it. Forest, Forest. And the book is the politics of double speech. Yeah. You see, the Islamists, they hate me and they try to kill me for one reason. I know them, I read their mind, I read their books, but you see, they come to you, and I suppose you don't speak Arabic, yeah? No. So you don't read, and they tell you something, and when they are among themselves, they say something. When they speak to Europeans or to Americans, they say something else. And this is something that, I hope I can, should I explain it or move to the next question? There is, in Islam, the history of Islam is very exciting. And actually, politicians and also people like you, academics, people who are general interest, you should read about Islam, but the right books. But you see, in Islam, there was, Muslims are a separated community. You have the Shia Muslim and the Sunni Muslim. The Sunni Muslims, they are today about 1.6 billion people in the world who are Muslims. So this is 25% of humanity. Yeah? And 90% of them are Sunnis, and 10% or 11% are Shiis. And from the beginning of the schism, the fight was not between Islam and the Jews, it was a fight between Muslims themselves. It was a fight between Sunni Muslims and Shi'i Muslims, And Shia Muslims, if somebody say you are a Shi'i and I'm a Sunni Muslim, then I kill you. And to save your life, you say you are a Sunni Muslim. But when you are at home with your family, you are a Shi'i Muslim. And when you are in public, they call it taqiyya. Taqiyya means dissimulation. So in public you are a Sunni, but at home in your heart you are Shi'i. And this is you cheat, you deceive the others to save your life, which is legitimate. Yeah? This is a Shi'i procedure. The Sunnis, including Hamas, they have learned it. Unfortunately, can I write something here? Or does it possible? No. Where? Okay. Well, taqiyya is the Shi'i term. The Sunni term is new. Is iham. Iham means deception. Deception of unbelievers. So when I talk to you, I go for democracy. I want peace. I want pluralism. And when I want peace, I say, kill them. Yeah. And this is the double speak. And this is journalists, politicians who do not speak Arabic, do not read Turkish or Farsi. They either should shut up or hire advisors who inform them well.
Okay, hang on. There's a few questions. Wait, I'm going to ask a question. You, in your presentation and in your work, you go to great lengths to distinguish between Judeophobia and anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
So, what is the purpose of doing it in the current context? And let me go back. I agree with your critique of Andrew Boston's work as being, I think, quite crude in some ways. But
it is enlightenment. I mean, also scholarship, because I mean.
But the question is,
but also there's a political intention behind it.
Okay, but if you go back to Judeophobia in the Islamic world, I'm thinking more in Shiite Islam, and it was also in Sunni Islam. The Jews were perceived as being impure. And the fatwas and the rulings and the perceptions were quite extreme when it came to the place of Jews in society. And there were massacres, and Jews, I'm thinking of Persian rulings and fatwas in Persian society, the notion of impurity was very strong. And Jews occupied a very specific strata in society, and they weren't allowed to really move. So you have this history of the other, the Jews, the other, in a very pejorative sense. And then you have the influence of, say, modernity, colonialism, missionaries, etc., transferring of knowledge and education, as you mentioned. And you have now, I'd say, within the Islamist mindset, a genocidal form of anti-Semitism. So how important is it to make a distinction when, on the one hand, you have very strong Judeophobia, if you want to call it, and now when we're living in a globalized world with centuries of sharing of knowledge and culture, you have a genocidal anti-Semitic movement, which is, I think, infused, as you say, with anti-Westernism, anti-Americanism, but it is, I think, tremendous challenge that we need to understand and comprehend. So why is it so important to make the distinction in contemporary context?
I start with a little example and then move it. I mean, there's a political intention. The political intention is if somebody is prejudiced, biased, you can enlighten this person. So a Judeophobic Muslim, if you work on him or her, you might hope for success to change the mindset. Yeah. So it is about resentment. But anti-Semitism as a genocidal ideology, it is a political program. Yeah? So this is a hopeless case. Yeah? And therefore, the distinction between Judeophobia and anti-Semitism is a distinction between resentment and genocidal ideology. And I bring you this example. I worked, I did field work when I was young. Now I do it less, but for more than 20 years I worked all over I worked in 20 different Islamic countries, and I lived there. And I go and live among the people. I lived among Islamists in Sudan, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Indonesia. Now I lived among Palestinians in the West Bank, and I lived among Palestinians in Jordan. They are different, believe me. Yeah. And I tell you this story. I was taking a cab, a taxi in Jerusalem, and the driver said, I'm German, and he wanted to cheat me. Yeah? And I said to him, I mean, please don't cheat in Arabic. Yeah? I mean, don't play games with me. I am an Arab and Muslim like you. You can do it with German tourists. He said, but you look so German. But you look so, it's okay. But when he cooled down, he said, you know, we cheat, our people cheat, and we like to cheat, you know, because they wanted to cheat me. And he said, but the Jews are much better. They don't do that. You know what? He said, how? He said, imagine this. This year, I received a reimbursement of the Israeli state for many thousand shekel. They paid me back many thousand shekel tax money that I have overpaid. And you know, in the tax declaration, they found I have paid more taxes than I should, and they paid it back to me and said, listen, the Jews are honest, yeah, but we cheat, yeah. And you see, can you imagine an Arab state does this? They are kullun haramiya, they are all thieves. I mean, an Arab talking about Arabs, yeah. And you see, the Palestinians who live in Israel, they interact with Jews, they know them from close, and they eat the two of them, and so they know they are not evil, yeah. And even but if you go to the West Bank when you are in Amman or in Nablus, yeah, and talk about the Jews, say, oh, kill the Jews, extinguish them, and so I mean. Judeo-phobic resentment can be enlightened. I believe in enlightenment. Yeah? Anti-Semitism cannot be appeased. Yeah? Now to the Shia, this is true, and this is also what you say is described at length. The book of Bernard Lewis about Jews and Islam is very positive about Islam, but he makes clear it is the Shia are a difficult case because this impurity, and the Jews are impure. And therefore, if you attach a Jew, then you become dirty. And if you put a clothing on that a Jew touch, then you are impure. But you see, I do not want to belittle of this. This is a religious sentiment. Yeah. But if you see in Islam, I mean, I know that. I mean, my wife looks at me, but she knows that I'm not like this. That exists in Sunni Islam, but mostly in Shia Islam. Women are impure because because they get their menstruation, and so women are as impure as the Jews are in a period of time. Yeah. So, but you see, this impurity is resentment, is ugly, but it is not genocidal. And I think Islamist anti-Semitism is genocidal, and this is much more than a sentiment about purity or about people who are considered to be whatever.
Okay, so and then
I was wanting to ask the same question about the difference.
okay.
About impurity?
No, about Judeophobia and anti-Semitism, but we had that clarified.
Okay.
In the United States, we like to pride ourselves with the concept of separation of church and state.
Yes.
And we use the term multicultural, diversity, and under this umbrella now, there are Muslim schools coming into Michigan, into Minnesota, in California, which are preaching the Islamist concept. The American Civil Liberties Union has taken it up, and I've written a research paper on that, and I am very concerned that under this broader concept of a diverse and pluralistic society, we're accepting the idea of the totalitarian concepts that we're supporting in our public schools. Are you familiar with that?
I'm very familiar, because what you are describing, and now it is beginning in the United States. In Germany, in Europe, it's already established. Yeah? And at Cornell University, we run a project with Professor Katzenstein, who's American-German, about religion in expanding Europe. And we published a book. He is Peter Katzenstein, distinguished professor at Cornell. The book published with Cambridge University Press. And my chapter is exactly on this. My chapter is Europeanizing Islam for the Islamization of Europe. And I argue, I discussed the concept of diversity. You know, Islamists, they are intelligent people. Islamists are not traditionalists. Islamists are mostly Western educated people, very intelligent, very knowledgeable, and they know what they're doing. And they are against all kinds of multiculturalism in their ideology, but they do not mind making use of cultural relativism and multiculturalism to press themselves forward. Yeah. So they say, I am not like you, and I'm different. You go for Islam, American law, I go for Sharia law, and within diversity, you have to accept me. And if you do not accept me, then you are a racist. And they play successfully this game. And in Europe, there's the grandson of Hassan al-Banna. Hassan al-Banna is the godfather of Islamism. He founded the movement. His grandson is Swiss, born in Switzerland. His name is Tariq Ramadan, and he's denied entering the United States under Bush. Maybe that was one of the few right decisions of Bush. And in Europe, he argues there must be an Islamic space, a space for Islam within Europe, and in this space, Sharia and all Islamic rules in the Islamist understanding apply, and Europe is outside. And if there's a veto between values of human rights and Islamic values, then in the name of diversity, you put the veto aside. And I argue for a veto. My argument is democracy versus difference. If there's a difference, I wouldn't let it go in the name of diversity if this difference contradicts democracy. Like you see, I am a Muslim, and I believe I'm a devout Muslim. Then an Islamist would come and say, Mr. Tibi is a hidden Jew, or he's whatever, and he's not a Muslim, and put me outside of Islam. See, this is an assault on my human rights, on my civil rights, and if you do it in the name of diversity, I won't let it go. Because democracy is above democracy is above diversity, and I think American people should learn that. Well, but you are not so in rush as we are in Europe. In Europe, Islamists are so established, and I have difficulties. You see, Mr. Ramadan is number one, and I say I defend Europe against Islamism, and they push me to the side, they corner me, and Mr. Ramadan is number one. Yeah? And he lies at them, like his book, if you go to the Yale bookstore, you'll find the title of his new book is Radical Reform, Liberation and Islamic Ethics. I write in my news, liberation from whom? From unbelievers? So it is, there is no radical reform, this is Salafism in a very tough way. We need information, and I'm very happy. I mean, Professor Charles Hill is here among us, and Professor Charles Hill will be running at the. I hope I can say, this is no secret. You will be running at the Hoover Institution a project about Islamism. There's a great need to enlighten not only ordinary American people, but also professors in this country. Enlighten them about Islam and Islamism, and say stop playing around with Islamists. They're making a tool of you. Yeah? So I mean, we have to establish knowledge and establish free debate on the issue, and stop talking this is Orientalism, bashing Islam, xenophobia, all these things. Of course, there's xenophobia. We fight it, but to fight against freedom of speech while using these things, then like the Sudanese government. So the Sudanese government is committing genocide against non-Muslims in Sudan, and when the Israeli Air Force bombs an Israeli employee, they say it's genocide. I mean, to bomb a genocide, to bomb a convoy smuggling arms, what is genocide about it? Yeah? But this is, the language becoming so loose, and the meaning is lost.
The book you mentioned, I just want to be sure I have it right. Politics of Double Speak or Speech?
Speak, double speak.
Double speak. And
her name is Forrest, yeah?
F-O-U-R.
Yeah.
And the problem for those of us who don't know Farsi or Arabic is somewhat solved by memory, right? Middle East media.
I know, yeah.
Right?
Very good.
It's a good source.
Very good source. Yeah.
Question.
But how many people look at that? Yeah?
How many people what?
How many people look at that? How many? That's
right. Question, what do you think of Melanie Phillips' book, Londonistan? Exaggerated, on target, what would you say?
She touches the point, and there are many facts about it, and there's, London is not Londonistan, but there are enclaves in London, which can be described as Londonistan. But you see, the book is not that bad, but I heard from Charles, she was here and lecturing, And so she's exaggerating, and then she's damaging the message. And then people use her to discard people like me, yeah?
Question here.
I have a question. You said that the Judeophobia began because the Jews were not willing to accept Islam. They were unbelievers.
Yeah.
So does that mean that anyone who does not accept Islam is an unbeliever, an infidel? What happens to Christianity and all the other religions?
Okay, well in Islam, this is a very good question. Yeah? In Islam, there are 4 categories. Yeah? In Islam, the first category, these are the best people, considered the Muslim believers, yeah, the true believers. They say al-mu'minun in Arabic. Yeah. The second category, they are believers, but believers second class. And these Jews and Christians, as it is acknowledged, I'm talking about Islam, not Islamism. For Islamists, Jews are unbelievers. But for Islam, in Islam and the theology of Islam, Jews are believers, and Christians as well. And this is acknowledged in the Quran. They are believers, but the Quran says there are revelations sent from God to humanity. And one of these revelations is Judaism. And Judaism is a message from God to humans, and it is revelation, and this is a belief. The same applies to Christianity. However, Judaism and Christianity share the fact, according to Islamic theology, this is not my position, they are religions, they come from God, but they are incomplete. And Islam is the seal that in the Quran say the Prophet Muhammad is Khatam al-Nabiyyin, which means the seals of prophecies. So in Islam, Moses is a prophet sent by God with a revelation, Jesus as well, and then Muhammad. But Muhammad is the last one, and his message is the seal. And that's why Muslims, I quote, not my position, Muslims claim superiority. If you look in my new book, Islam's Predicament with Cultural Modernity, there's a chapter about pluralism. This is chapter 7, yeah? Chapter 7 about pluralism. And this is one of the great predicaments in Islam, not Islamism. Because Muslims today must learn they are equals to others. And if they don't learn that, then there will be always troubles. Yeah? So the second category, incomplete believers, or second class believers. The third category, the unbelievers. The unbelievers, all religions, not only atheists, all religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhs, they are all unbelievers. And the fourth category, al-munafiqun, the hypocrites. They are Muslims who say, I'm a Muslim, but in reality they are not. Yeah? So these are the hypocrites. And all humanity is subdivided along these 4 categories. So Jews are, according to Islamic theology, second-class believer. In Islamism, it's not like this. Islamists say Jews are, Qutb writes that in his book, which I quote. He said the Jews were, at the beginning, were second-class believers, and they were accepted as people with a message from God, but they forfeit their right to be second-class believers, and they are now today to be ranked as unbelievers, as infidels. So these are just information.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for your presentation. And also just a very quick announcement, this week is very full for us. Our seminars continue tomorrow with 2 very interesting ones. We have Benjamin Weinthal, who's the Jerusalem Post correspondent based in Berlin, and he's speaking about the German-Iranian economic relations and the failure of Germany to combat Iranian anti-Semitism. And he's written some very good pieces over the years on these issues, and I think it will be a very exciting lecture. And then in the evening, we have Yossi Klein Halevi, who will be speaking about the Jewish theological implications of the new anti-Semitism. So it should be a full day, and everybody's welcome to these events. So thank you for coming. And thank you.